once again, you find yourself in a mess. And again, just like so many times before, you say, God, save me. But still that surrender is missing. You know, if we confess with our mouth and believe in our heart, Jesus Christ as Lord, you shall be saved. Well, you know, God save me. I want you to be my Savior. I want you to get me out of this mess. But I don't want you to be my Lord. I've got to turn everything over to you. So once again, you ask God to get you out of the mess, but were you ready to completely surrender to Him?
Well, around Christmas 2013, I've been doing good, doing bad, doing good, doing bad. Nothing really serious either one way or the other. You know, I'd go a few days doing great. I'd slip up, smoke weed one weekend. You know, I'd be doing great. I'd get drunk one weekend. And I didn't have a job or anything at the time, so it was just a lot of free time. And this guy by the name of Phil Bickert, he's been making my prosthetics for like 7 years, 5 or 6 years. He starts his own place in Corinth, and he gives me a call. He's like, "Hey man, look, just laid the foundation. I've got a shop. I'm on my own." He said, "You know, I need an assistant." He said, you don't know anything about making prosthetics, but nobody walks as good as you, so you can help teach people, you know, how to walk, and also I can teach you how to make the prosthetics." I found a place in Corinth and an apartment, and I called you, and you were like, you know, you need to find a church home, somewhere you can go, the accountability. And so I did, and I went to a church, and I was literally there every morning, every Sunday morning, every Sunday night, and every Wednesday night for a while. And I was saving up money, I was working, I was doing great. You know, I had all my bills paid, I had just got a new TV, a new Xbox. You know, I was doing really good. I had a few $1,000s saved up, and I bought some tickets for some basketball games and taking my little brothers to the basketball games, got a Jeep. And I was doing good, but it was all efforts that I was just making. I never sought God. God, is this what you want me to do? Is this the job you have for me? Is this the church you want me to go to? Is this the city you want me to live in? That thought never crossed my mind. I always just saw God as, I'm going to do something, and then I'm going to try to not get high and hope that God blesses whatever I'm doing. I never thought to ask God if this is where He wants me to go. That thought never crossed my mind. And I'll remember it like it was yesterday. I had been clean for a while, and I was going home. It was Friday night. It was like my 12th Friday night in a row of being by myself. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna buy a 6-pack and get a couple of Italian Mafia movies, and I'm just gonna, you know, do a little drinking and watch some movies by myself. Didn't see anything wrong with it. And I get maybe halfway through with one of the movies. I done drank everything that I bought, and I called an old friend of mine who was in Tupelo, and we were talking, and he was like, "Well, man, come on over." And I was like, "You come over." And he was like, "Man, I'm drunk." I was like, "Well, I'm not drunk, but I've been drinking." And I got in the car, I drove to Tupelo and hung out with him, and it was on. I think we drank every night for the next 3 weeks. I started smoking again, and then that was when I remember, after a few weeks of just the partying every day, he was like, "Man, you ever done meth?" And I was like, "No." He said, "You want to?" I was like, "Yeah, I'll try it." And so I bought some, and for about a month, we got high every day. Not always on meth, but on something. I mean, it was a month, 1 to 2 months that we were messed up on something every day. And it wasn't long after that I got arrested, and I was in jail for 37 days. I got out, and I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. I was ate up with pride because I couldn't tell anybody about it. And I chose to live in my Jeep in a parking lot for the entire month of November last year. It's freezing, over asking somebody for help. And I ended up getting a little shack in Mentachie. And it was there that I was alone every day, for the entire month of December and for almost the entire month of January, until I woke up one day and I was like, you know what? I'm going to church. I don't know why, but I did. And I went to church with my mom. She didn't know I was coming. I hadn't talked to her. I just showed up, and me and her went out after. I went to her house after, and we talked, and she was like, you need help. You know, I wasn't really doing drugs. I was smoking pot, and I was getting high, but it wasn't on anything that I considered hardcore. And I was like, yeah, I need somewhere that I can go and that I can get back into the Word and go back to church, and all the typical churchy answers. And I got here, and that's what I thought I was going to do. I was going to come here. I was going to get clean again. I was going to save up some money. I was going to find out, what I wanted to do with my life, and I was going to get focused, and this 9 months would be a time for me to stay clean long enough that I wouldn't want the drugs anymore, and I was going to pick something to do and ask God to come along with me for the ride. And I'd been here about a week, and I had been in God's presence. I don't know if you remember, but it was like every time we were in church or in class, I would just cry. And I wouldn't wail, but I was not blinking, because if I blinked, tears were pouring down, and I would sit there with my eyes open, and they would just start pouring out anyway. My eyes would just swell up, and I was like, man, I don't know what is going on. I didn't know what was happening. It was driving me crazy. And I was at the ranch, and we were watching. I was watching a movie about a little girl who had cancer, and I don't even remember what it was about. I just remember there was a scene where she dies, and they said something in the movie that I had said when my dad passed away. I mean, almost verbatim. And like instantly my eyes started swelling up, and I felt all these emotions, all this anger, this frustration, it was like everything over the 7 years that I had been running, just all of a sudden, all of it boiled up right inside me, and I felt like I was going to throw up. And there was nobody in the room. It was just me. It was like 10 o'clock at night, freezing outside. I come booking it outside, and I looked around. I didn't see anybody, and I just yelled. Like, it was just all I could do to yell. I just yelled, and I was like, why do I feel like this? Why is this me? Why am I here again at another program? Why can't I do right? And I was just like, everything that I had been scared to even ask God over the last 7-8 years, it just all poured out of me. I asked God why everything that had ever happened to me, good and bad. Why did it all happen? And I could not figure out for the life of me why I was so miserable. And then it dawned on me that the reason I couldn't forgive myself, the reason I couldn't forgive my dad, the reason I had no hope was because I didn't have God. I'd asked him to save me so many times, but I never completely surrendered anything to him. And because of that, he'd never been my Lord and Savior. He'd just been somebody that I knew a lot about, that I liked to pretend I was friends with.
That Jenny bottle analogy.
Yeah.
God come out and save me, get me out of this mess again. And as soon as he did, boom, you're gone again because you never surrendered.
And I remember asking God the question, would you still forgive me if I asked you now? Even though I don't feel like I deserve to be forgiven. And I almost talked myself out of it, but then something hit me. It was like God just said, I've already died. So whether you accept my forgiveness or not, I've already paid the price for it.
Wow.
It's kind of like owing the bank money, and someone pays the bank money for you, but you still move out of your house like it's been foreclosed. It already been paid. I just wasn't accepting it. Whether I accepted it or not doesn't change the fact that Jesus had done what he did for me. And when I realized that, it was like this flood of emotion, and it's the closest you hear people say God wrapped their arms around you. Man, I just thought they were crazy. But man, I felt like I was getting a hug for the first time in my life. And I'm not a dramatic fall on my knees and face before the Lord type person, but man, I did. Literally, I didn't even use my hands to slow down. I just hit the floor right in front of the cross. And I just was crying, and I was like, I'm an idiot for not thinking that I could trust you. I'm sorry. Dying daily is it's proof of God's sense of humor. Because at that moment when I surrendered everything, that feeling of relief, it's like I felt, I mean, it was like I've been completely made new. I mean, all these verses in the Bible that I have memorized from a kid, they just all made sense at that moment. I understood what they all meant. And I thought, man, I'm good. But the thing is that I still had to deal with pride. I still had to deal with fear. I still had to deal with feelings of inadequacy, anger. Those are all things that had been such a part of my life. They were more of a habit than the actual drugs that I did to numb them. And so God, being about the process and not the destination, is more so in the trials that it takes to overcome those emotional addictions than he is in the actual end result after I get them all done. It's
that whole process. It's that onion being peeled, is it not?
Yeah. Oh,
and there's
man,
many
yeah.
layers of that onion that has to be peeled. So when God begins to work on you, here you are. And a lot of people think, okay, I'm saved, so now everything's good. And God goes, no, not really, because here's what we need to do. This doesn't look like me. This doesn't look like me.
Yep.
And that's what you're talking about, the removal of those things that don't exemplify Christ.
Yeah, that's it. And being someone who did drugs for so long, you know, we run to the drugs to avoid the problem. So whenever there's a situation, you don't face the situation. You go and you wait for it to pass on by, and then you try to go back out. So the hardest concept to learn, the most frustrating concept, was when something surfaced, when pride surfaced, dealing with it right then. That was such a foreign concept. It was like, okay, well, let me wait until I'm not, you know, frustrated, and then I'll deal with my frustration. Let me wait till I'm not angry, then I'll deal with my anger. Yeah. Let me, you know, wait till I've been humbled, then I'll deal with my pride. And it doesn't work that way. And so what would happen is I had this fear of messing up because of the pride. I felt like I needed to be perfect, you know, and because of those feelings of inadequacy, I was scared to do anything. When I messed up, I beat myself up, because that's what Satan had been doing to me for so long, was beating me up because of my sin. So I'd mess up, I'd get beat up about it, and the pride would swell up, and I'd want to defend myself. And so this onion being peeled, you know, every time. But because of my surrender to God, it made me willing to go through the process.
Oh, yeah.
And that's essentially it was some people see salvation as the finish, but no, I started the race. Don't be proud of where I am. Don't in any way think that I've done anything right other than giving up, because there was a time where I thought that, you know, I had to make mistakes for my testimony to be great.
Wow.
And I've realized that my testimony is great because God's in it, and he would have been in it whether I ran from the police or not, whether I'd overdosed or not. And how much more beautiful of a testimony would it have been if I could say that when my dad started making his bad decisions, I ran to Jesus, and I've lived my life right from then on. And I never made these mistakes. Because there's some people that aren't making those mistakes, and they hear these elaborate testimonies like mine of nothing but bad decisions, bad decisions, bad decisions. And it's awesome that God's love and mercy and grace is that bountiful that there's really no extent that you can go that he can't reach you. You can't run too far from his love. But when the testimony isn't of someone running to the world and then God pulling them back, but someone running to God and God just embracing them, that's such a beautiful testimony. And I can't express how thankful and proud I am of Chase for not making these decisions, being faced with the same situations that I was, and for Zeke and Landon and my mom, and how thankful I am that there was only one prodigal son, because so many times the father messes up, the older son messes up, and then all the brothers mess up. And I'm so thankful that they're not. And if there's anything I could say to them, it's that I love y'all and I'm sorry, but I'm so thankful that we're still a family and that I do still have y'all. And I'm so proud, and I know Dad would be too.